Hi, this is Jared from Future Retro, and today I'd like to introduce you to a brand new product, the Mondovox. The Mondovox is a single rack space unit. It is a polyphonic MIDI processing unit that takes polyphonic playing over a MIDI channel of up to 16 notes, and then intelligently rearranges or routes those 16 notes onto their own MIDI channel in various ways depending on the modes here that we've got. On the front panel you've got MIDI in, MIDI through, 4 MIDI outputs. On the back panel you've got 12 more MIDI outputs and your power connector. The power supply we should mention is a 9 volt DC. It operates on 100 volt to 240 volt mains voltages, and the power supply as well comes with various different country plug standards, so you can just swap the plugs and use this product in any country you probably will visit. Alright, as it said here, here's the MIDI jacks. Next to each MIDI jack you've got an LED indicator. Those will light up when MIDI in will light up when it's receiving messages. The MIDI outs A, B, C, and D, each one of these LEDs will light up when MIDI is being sent out of that MIDI out port. There are 4 MIDI processors inside of here, and that allows us to handle MIDI very quickly. Depending on the various routing modes here, will determine how these 4 internal processors will reroute the MIDI and which outputs they'll use and the various algorithms they'll use to calculate what needs to go where. On this system we've got 3 access units set up here that are for creating a 3-voice polyphonic synthesizer. When you turn the unit on for the very first time, it's waiting to define what MIDI message or what MIDI channel it's going to receive information on. The first MIDI note that we send it, we just sent it a note on channel 1. That's now going to set this incoming MIDI channel to 1, and it'll stay there until we turn the unit off and turn it back on, which then it'll look for the next first MIDI note. We can define our voices, or the amount of modules that we've got connected up, by routing or by rotating this control to the define voices mode. Since we have 3 modules cooked up, we're going to tap our MIDI controller 3 times. That's going to define that we have 3 voices hooked up here. Now each one of these is monophonic. You do not have to use our products with the Mondovox. You can use any MIDI monophonic synthesizer, and you can actually use multitimbral synths, polyphonic synths. It doesn't really matter as long as it's got MIDI, because that's what the Mondovox is going to generate. Let's talk about the different modes. Here we have Unison Bend. It's going to play all available voices at once for every key that we press. At the same time, the Mondovox will respond to pitch bend, mod wheel, and velocity messages and send those on to the modules that are connected up to it. The unique thing about the Mondovox compared to traditional polyphonic synths is normally when you stack all your voices in a unison mode, you're then only able to play 1 note at a time. With the Mondovox, you're actually able to play 16 different transpositions of that stack of voices. Now these are all monophonic, so I can't show you what it sounds like playing multiple versions, but what it does do is when you receive the second note on, it's going to trigger the internal glide circuit in these access units. Now I've set up each one of these access units to have a slightly different glide time, just to demonstrate a popular effect that Tom Oberheim came up with, which is gliding the voices at different rates to detune them as they're gliding to create a really nice big sound. So let's first play a sound by itself. You hear that's all in unison and in tune as we glide to another note. You hear the voices all get further apart, detuned, and then come back together in unison as they reach their final pitch. So that's unison bend mode. We can Let me turn down our glides here just so you don't hear gliding. There I'm using pitch bend. And I'm using my mod wheel to control the filter cutoff on all 3 units. So that mode's pretty obvious what it does. These next 3 are brand new features that we came up with, and they are called Unison detune modes. Now the 3 different versions, they're basically all the same. The first mode is going to detune all the voices down from the bass pitch. The second one's going to detune the voices both up and down from the bass pitch, and the third mode will detune up from the bass pitch. Again, the unit will respond to mod wheel and velocity messages and pass those on to the modules that are here. But now instead of responding to pitch bend and sending that on to these modules, we take the pitch bend message and intelligently use that information by how far the pitch bender is being manipulated to detune each one of these voices in various ways to spread apart the voices. Alright, as I play a voice, you're going to hear all the voices in unison. And as I slowly increase the pitch bend wheel, you're going to hear the voices detune from one another. Voices will stay there now that I've let go of my pitch bend wheel, brought it back to the 0 position. I'm free to play the keys how I'd want, be able to manipulate these modules however I want, and it'll stay in that detune mode until I bring the mod wheel back into the negative direction. So if I do that, now I've cleared out that detuning, adding in the detuning. Let's add a little bit of ornamental back into our sound here. Okay, that's detuned down, I should say. Sounds pretty big. I mean, here you can hear there's unison. Now they're fatten it up. Sounds pretty good. Now let's introduce our second oscillators in each module. That's just not big enough for me yet. Again, there's unison. Adjust my envelope times here. Alright, show you what detune up and down does. Again, it's going to detune half the voices up, half the voices down, and one of the units is going to stay at the bass pitch. Again, I cleared that out, so now everything's in unison. You can tell that the range of the up and down detuning is much greater than the detune down or the detune up by itself, and that's because we have less voices to work with and we can take those voices farther in their range. That's a little bit drastic. You get more dissonance there. Where the dissonance really plays a part is when you're controlling a multitimbral sound module with up to 16 voices, so there's less space in between each voice, and then you really start to get full sounds that just take up more space. Let's listen to the detune up now. Again, here we are in unison. I'm going to increase the detune amount. Again, I'm turning down oscillator 2 on all these and clear out my unison or detune amount. Okay, everything now is playing in unison, and I'm going to increase the detune amount. And you can just hear those oscillators spread apart, and now everything's much fatter. Again, clear out the detune. Everything's back in unison. Alright, the next mode here is Unison Poly. That was really inspired by the Jupiter 8's polyphonic mode, where if we play a single note on our MIDI controller here, it's going to assign all voices to that same note. As soon as we play a second note, it's going to steal some of those voices that it was playing and reassign it to the second note. Same with the third note and all the other notes as they play. If they're available by our voice routing, we'll steal that voice and reassign it to another module. So here, I'm going to play just a single note. And now I'm going to add in another note. There's 2 notes, and here's 3. So I can play 3 at once. I can play 2. Or I can play just 1. Yeah, I'm going to bring in the second oscillator, so just get that nice full sound. Next mode is polyrandom. What that's going to do is it's going to allow us to play notes polyphonically, but the assignment of which module is going to play what note will be randomized. Now obviously it can't play, if one module is playing, it can't play the second note as well. So as we play one note, and hopefully you can see this, but there's a blue LED on each one of these that indicates when each module is playing. So right now, this one's playing, now this one's playing, now that one's playing. And as I hit just a single key over and over, you'll see these selections jumping around between different modules. That adds more randomization between the sound of each module because it's going to vary a little bit, and that'll give you a nice full sound. Every time you play a note in a chord, if you were to play the same chord over and over, it's going to sound slightly different. The other cool thing about that is if we didn't assign the same sound to each module, let's say we assigned, I don't know, a bass sound here, a lead sound here, and some sound effect here, by repeatedly playing one note over and over, we're going to randomly select which voice is going to be playing at any time. The other thing we can do is, like right now, we've got one of these modules panned hard left, one's panned hard right, one's panned in the middle. So even if we're playing the exact same sound on every module, you would then hear it randomly pan to different positions in the stereo field. You could do a whole lot of cool stuff with this if you're controlling, say, a digital multitimbral synth, because then you've got all sorts of different sounds that you could then randomly sequence between. Let's talk about the next mode here. We have poly chase. And what that does is every time we hit a note, here we're playing this module, now we're playing the second module, now we're playing the third module. And let me adjust these a little bit. And so that's going to be true. It's always going to just keep rotating, what some people call a round robin technique. So I can play a chord. And you can hear those changing just a little bit because they're panned in different positions. Again, that's going to add a little bit more predictability to your polyphonic playing than the polyrandom, but not make it so rigid and every voice sounding exactly the same every time. Now a cool technique you can use is the poly chase. We could actually use this as a type of pseudo sequencer. Since every module is selected in order sequentially, you know, again, if you could set these up to be different sounds, like a kick drum, a snare drum, a hi-hat, whatever, and then be able to sequence through those. By adjusting our defined voices, or how many different modules it's going to play before it loops back around and play one, then we're effectively adjusting our loop point for that sequence. And again, if, let's say you wanted to sync that sequence up to a drum machine or whatever, and you definitely wanted this module to start playing on your first note, you can switch away from poly chase mode and then switch back, and the first note that you play will then be reset to always be module number 1. So here we go. So you could use that as a type of sequencer as well. The next mode here is poly first. Every time we play a note, when all notes are released, it's always going to select this first module. It doesn't matter if I let up, play it again, it's always going to play this one. If I play, here's one note, it always chooses the exact same order, starting with this module, the second module, then the third module, giving you more predictable results in the way a polyphonic note is going to sound. Now something else cool in this mode is we can play a chord of up to 16 notes. I'm just playing 3 right now. And now I've switched to chord memory, which is the next mode. And by holding those notes and switching to this next chord memory location, what I've done is I've recorded all the notes that I was holding, and now it's going to allow me to play those notes using just a single key on the keyboard. And when we were in poly first mode and I was playing those that 3-note chord, the first note that I played is going to be remembered as the bass pitch for this recorded chord. Now again, like our unison bend mode, with traditional poly synths, once you latch a chord into memory, you're then only able to play one version of that chord at any transposition. But what's unique about the Mondovox is we allow you to play up to 16 different versions of that same transposition of whatever chord you've latched in there. Now again, each one of these is monophonic, so it can only play that 3-note chord. But if we play a second note, we are then activating our internal glide time circuit for each access, so I'll do that now. Now if we were playing a digital multitimbral synth, we could play up to 16 different transpositions of up to 16 different notes latched as a chord for, again, 256 different oscillators playing at one time, which is just a huge sound. The define voices, if we haven't already mentioned that allows us to define how many modules we've got set up at any given time. The way you define voices is you just select this mode, and then with your MIDI controller you tap the number of voices you have just with any key on the keyboard. So if we go 1, 2, 3, we now define 3 modules connected up to our unit. That selection of however many you enter in will be stored into memory even when the power is turned off. Same with the define routing here, the next mode. Any adjustments we make to that, when we turn the power off, it's going to store it in memory. There is no backup battery for you to worry about, it just stores it inside the processors. Now this last mode here, this define routing, we can adjust which routing mode we're using here, and you can see by the LEDs there's 3 of them. Every time I hit a key on the MIDI controller, it's going to select the next routing mode. In the first routing mode, we take MIDI coming in here, and each of the 4 processors that are inside will handle all 16 MIDI channels. That's going to be useful if we're controlling a multitimbral sound module, such as a digital synth that has 16 different MIDI channels that it can respond to, a high polyphony count, so it can play at least 1 voice per MIDI channel, if not more. And that allows, since those multitimbral sound modules only have 1 MIDI input, this allows us to route just 1 MIDI output into that voice, or into that module, and receive on all 16 channels. Routing number 2 here, what that does is each of the 4 processors handles 4 MIDI channels each. So MIDI out A is then going to handle the first 4 MIDI channels, 1 through 4. MIDI out B will handle the next 4, 5 through 5, 6, 7, and 8. MIDI out C is going to handle the next 4, being 9, 10, 11, and 12. MIDI out D is going to handle the next 4, being 13, 14, 15, and 16. Now the reason we have that mode is if you're controlling a, let's say you've got a 4-voice or less system, you could just take out this one MIDI output, and if your modules that you're controlling have MIDI throughs, you can route your MIDI out to your in, your through, onto the next one, daisy chaining up to 4 synths per each one of these outputs. You never have to worry about connecting stuff to the back or multiple cables coming out of the front. It's just a cleaner way. But the drawback to that method is you're still sending MIDI information serially, one note at a time, to the different MIDI sound modules. So it takes your standard amount of time to play a chord. The third routing mode here, again, is going to use each of the 4 processors handling 4 voices, but now instead of handling voices 1 through 4 with processor 1, each processor here is going to handle, like MIDI out A is going to handle MIDI channel 1, MIDI out B is going to handle MIDI channel 2, MIDI out C is going to handle MIDI channel 3, MIDI out D is going to handle MIDI channel 4. And that's going to loop back around. The processors will handle 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. And why that is useful is now we've got more MIDI cables coming out, which is a little bit messier, true. But unlike traditional MIDI, we can actually send a 4-note chord, all notes simultaneously, to each one of these modules, giving us faster MIDI transmission than you would normally get. That's what we've been using here is the routing number 3. That's going to give us your fastest time. And most notably, you'll notice if you use one of the other routing modes, let's say you're in unison mode, you've got the 16 voices, and you're doing a pitch bend, and it's having to send that pitch bend over 16 channels, which pitch bend, if you do not know, already generates like twice the amount of data that a normal MIDI note would. Plus it's being continuously varied, so it's generating just a ton of information. And every one of those voices for the pitch bend had to be sent one at a time. So controlling 16 different voices and hearing that pitch bend all at once, you're going to actually notice some latency throughout the voices. So by having these different modes, we can then control the 16 voice system very quickly and not get those bad results that you would if you're just using one processor. So again, you can use up to 16 different MIDI sound modules, and you know, today there's just so many different monophonic synthesizers out there, some very inexpensive, just a couple $100 each. You know, basically they are very basic. You know, the less expensive modules that you get. Something like the Excess, each one of these voices is very powerful. It's basically like a little modular synthesizer, and so having a polyphonic version like this is just very powerful. There's not much you can't do with this type of system, and but it just does take up more space than a traditional polyphonic synth. But we think the results are well worth it because you can do stuff that you just can't do with a traditional synth. So Mondovox is brand new. It's going to start shipping in October. Retail price is $300, and will be available directly through our website at futureretro.com, or you can visit any of our worldwide dealers, also listed on that website, and stop by any of our dealers, check one out, and enjoy it. We think we really like this unit. We do, and the neat thing about it is it just adds so much to your existing sound modules. You know, I'm sure you've got some MIDI sound modules that are just sitting in the corner of your studio neglected because you don't really like the sound, they sound thin or whatever. I guarantee you hook them up to this, try them out again, play with the detune modes, you're going to fatten them up and make them sound like something they never were intended to sound like. Or the designers had intended them to sound that good, but they didn't. But so there it is. Mondovox, available soon. Enjoy. Thanks for watching.